Welcome or welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a wonderful day today. Today we're going over the last 2 months of my reading, which is my May and June reading wrap up. So I did very well these past 2 months. I read a total of 12 books. I think that was a good number, 6 books per month, which equaled out to a total of 5,399 pages. I think that I am very happy with that number. I am hoping to read some bigger books continuing on into the year, but that was pretty good for those 2 months. My average rating over these 2 months was 3.6, but it was higher in May than it was in June, and you'll find out in a second why that is. But let's, without further ado, jump into the books that I read in these 2 months. Now, firstly, we'll go over my DNFs. So my DNFs, if you haven't watched these videos before, I basically keep 1 sentence each. So the first DNF was A Scar on the Bone by Sophie Jordan. It had a large space of missing time and I just didn't care anymore about what the book was about. I also DNF'd The North Wind by Alexandria Warwick. I basically hated the main character and plot holes were already showing themselves at the start of the book. And the last book I DNF'd was Iluka by Cassie Stroud. I got 50% of the way into this book and I just think the subject matter just wasn't interesting to me in the slightest. The first book I read in the month of May was The Dark Lord's Guide to Dating and Other War Crimes by Tiffany Hunt, and I rated this book 3.5 stars, which is basically following a Dark Lord who finds out that he needs to marry someone that's part of the hero bloodline so that he can gain power of an ancient heirloom. So what does he find as the number one solution to that problem? Kidnap her, of course. But his one qualm is that he just isn't allowed to fall in love. I really enjoyed this book. This was very reminiscent of Assistant to the Villain. It had the humor there that it needed. If anything, it was a little bit more adult than Assistant to the Villain, which I think was what it needed to become something different. I was having such a good time at the start of this book. I love a female main character who's not afraid to show who she is. I do also love a male main character who is essentially morally grey. He's not the most evil, but he's also not the most good. I loved that it had a little bit more darker elements than Assistant the Villain normally has. There were only a couple of things that didn't quite hit for me, but they're all personal feelings and are not anything to do with my opinion of the writing at all. It's just certain things that happened that I was like, I could have used a little bit more context with that. But overall, this was a really good book. And I am excited to read the second one. I feel like it's going to be a lot better than the first one. And it's just one of those books that you just have a good time and you don't take too seriously. And I think that that was really, really good. The next book I read, however, was 6 Scorched Roses by Carissa Broadbent. And this was the first 5-star of the year. Oh my God, it took me so long to get a 5-star. I was losing faith in the romantasy genre. I was losing faith in my reading. I thought, oh my God, I don't like reading anymore. I thought I was too fussy. And then this book came along and it slapped me upside the head and it said, no, I am freaking here. And oh my God, I'm so glad that came into my life at that point because I was really, really struggling. To go 4 months without a 5-star read under my belt was really, really hard for me to get through, but I did get through it and I had a good time. I love this author so much. This book is basically set in the same world as The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which I'll go into in the next book. This is following a character who lives in this village that a plague is sort of annihilating. And she figures out a way that could be a possible cure, which entails her going to the house that no one goes to of the centuries old vampire and asking for his blood so that she can experiment on it to find a medicine for this plague. Her sister has this plague and she is deteriorating by the day and she just really wants to save her life. And the way this plague works was so interesting because it's like people are basically slowly turning to ash. Like when they get so bad, they can bump their hand against something and their skin falls away in ash. And I was really enjoying that part of it. I enjoyed the romance. I enjoyed our main characters. I just had such a good bloody time with this book. It was so, so, so good. And I'm so happy that it was a 5-star. And from reading this and having a 5-star, I thought, that's it. I'm going to read the first book in the series it's connected to, which is the first duology, The Serpent and the Wings of Night. Now, I have read this before, so this was a reread for me, but I did need to reread it in order to continue the duology because I haven't read the second one in that duology yet. But The Serpent and the Wings of Night also got a 5-star. And that was still a little bit of a shock for me because yes, I have read it before, and yes, I rated it 5 stars at that point as well. But the fact that it was still a 5-star when I've had such a bad reading month was ultimately just telling me that I just wasn't reading the right books, and it wasn't me. I'm not the problem. I loved this book so much. This is following Araya, and she is essentially a human who has been raised from a young age by a vampire king, and she has been training her whole life up until this point to enter this competition called the Kalari, I think it was called, and it's basically a tournament graced by the goddess of death. And at the end of it, if you win, you get one wish, and ultimately her goal is for that one wish to be linked to the king that she sees as a father figure, so that she can become a vampire without the risk of dying during the transition. But her being the only human in this tournament means that she's in so much danger the entire time, and she ends up having to make alliances with people or vampires that she wouldn't normally think of doing. I forgot how unique her storytelling is in this series. You need to understand that I don't like her other series, Daughter of No Worlds. I didn't like that. I DNF'd that first book pretty much halfway through. But this series, she nails on the head. She's like, it's so unique, and there's so much details in things that you don't think are important at the time, but they will come at the end and you will realize how important those details actually were. I forgot how good it was when I first initially read it, and that's why I came into this knowing that I rated the novella a 5-star. I came back into this not realizing how good that it was when I initially read it. And yes, I have not read the second one yet in that duology, but I do intend on reading it very soon so I can keep up the momentum because it's so good. And I just don't know what else to say about it. I just had such a good time. I love like how she writes her characters as well, and they're all going through something different, and you can see the characters that are building up for the duologies that come after this one, and it's just perfect. 5-star. I am so glad that I finally got 2 5-stars in a row, but a 5-star in general was so good, and I'm so happy that happened. The next book I read was When the Moon Hatched by Sarah A. Parker, and I rated this one 4 stars. It scraped into a 4-star, mind you. This is set in a world where dragons become moons when they die. And the magic that people perform is linked to songs. They have to sing the song of the god that their magic is linked to. And we're sort of following Rave, who is a deadly rebel assassin. And she's relatively navigating under the radar because she doesn't want people to know what she's doing or who she is. So she wears a veil. But when she's on this job, this strange man comes along and he's convinced that she is someone that he knew from his past, and she doesn't know who this person is, and she doesn't believe him at all, but she ends up having to go with this guy because unforeseen circumstances happen, and he basically saves her life. And she goes with him. The whole time she's thinking about revenge against this other person, but she's learning about this life that this other woman had that apparently looks exactly like her. Now, this was a book that my friends were pushing me to read. It was on my bookshelf for a while. It has dragons in it. I'm known to love dragon books, and I loved the dragons in this book so much. I think that they were really well done. The thing that was frustrating me a little bit was our main character. The main character was irritating me to a certain extent. I think it was the way the writing was going. So this author writes in a very lyrical, poetic prose that just makes you have to pay attention to it so that you don't lose any details. But I think she was trying to put humor into her lyrical writing, and it just was clashing slightly at the start. and I had a little bit of trouble getting into it in that respect. So the first half of the book was very slow for me, and I had a lot of trouble focusing, and I had a lot of issues with our main character. I didn't like that she was sort of rejecting everything that was being handed to her or said to her. I do understand it to a certain extent with her character growth and her character development and what she'd just gone through. I understand it all through that. But I am also glad that the main male character in this book did not give up on her. And I'm glad that he was resilient and telling her and not giving up on her, but not forcing it on her, but also making her see things that she didn't want to see, but she needed to see. I did appreciate that. He was probably the best part of this whole book for me. I do like how it ended though, and I'm willing to continue the series. I'm really excited to continue the series because I feel like from here, it can only get so much better. Again, it's a 4-star. So it's still pretty high up there. I still loved this world. I love this world so much. She does so much world building that's just so beautiful. And the descriptions are beautiful as well. They're heartbreaking. They really make you feel a lot of feelings, and anger and sadness are just the main two. And I can't wait to continue. But it did take me a bit to get here. So if you're wanting to read this book, I do feel like if you're having trouble with the first half of the book, try and push through a little bit to when it gets interesting. And if you still can't, then put it down. But it did take me a little bit to get into it. And that's me as someone who is used to reading writing like that. I think, like I said, it was just the humor that was clashing with it that was making it a little bit slower for me to read. The last books I read in May are a part of the same series. The first one was Freeing the Wild, and the second one was Chasing the Fire by Paisley Hope. I rated Freeing the Wild 4 stars and Chasing the Fire 3 stars. In the video I filmed with these, I did say that I rated Chasing the Fire 3.5 stars, but I was still thinking about it, and I landed on a 3-star because it wasn't my most favorite book in that series, but it was still good. Like, this is a guilty pleasure author for me. She writes books that I just enjoy binge reading, and I giggle, kick my feet, have a great time. I cringe a couple of times. I get angry at people. I get sad for them. I get happy for them. A whole roller coaster of emotions. I really did enjoy these books though. So the first one, Freeing the Wild, follows Cassie, and she is basically a country music star that's rising to fame, and she is the sister of someone living on this ranch, and she has a traumatic event happen, and she ends up going back to live with her sister or near her sister to try and heal from this traumatic event that's got her going through PTSD and anxiety attacks and everything. But she ends up moving back there next door to the cowboy who had actually had a one-night stand with her, and she had left, basically abandoned at that bar to go back to her life. So yes, that was a really enjoyable book for me. I had such a fun time. The representation of anxiety was really well done in my opinion, and the therapy that she was going through made sense for exactly what she was experiencing. I was so mad at people in her life, but I'm so glad that she grew and grew stronger and learnt to stand up for herself and fight for what she wants and for her mental health. And I really enjoyed that in this book. The next book, Chasing the Fire, is a accidental pregnancy trope. Essentially, they had a one-night stand, accidental pregnancy ensues. It's also got a guy in it. He is the chief firefighter of the town. His name is Asher, and he is like a really quiet, broody, acts of service man. And I really loved seeing everything that he did for her. It did start out a bit humorous, but also a bit like, oh, I don't know about him, because he kept calling her clumsy, and how could she be so clumsy, and rolling his eyes because he's like, I'm surprised you're not dead at this point. I loved that aspect of it. I didn't enjoy this, like the spice in this book. Half of it was good, like really good, and half of it was, oh, okay, there's too much spice now. Because it wasn't that the spice was cringy, It was that I wanted more of their love story, because this is basically, for years, he's been watching out for her. He's been delivering things to her door anonymously, and she knew it was him, sort of, but not definitely. And then these things happen, like she has a fire in her house and he comes and like saves the day, and she like gets closer with him, and they have this one night stand, an accidental pregnancy. I wanted to discover their connection a little bit deeper than it happened, and I think that's why it got a 3-star from me. But overall, like, I love this author's books. Oh my god, they're so good. They're such guilty pleasure books for me, and I am looking forward to the next series that she's got that's set a town over, I believe, and I'm hyped to see what comes from that. But yeah, that was all the books I read in the month of May, so let's move on to the month of June. So in June, the first book I read was Backstroke by L.B. Martin, and I rated this book 1 star. So this is a dark college romance. It's a swimmer romance is the sport. Yeah. Look. I used to be a competitive swimmer, and let's put this into perspective. If he had have been swimming in real life, he wouldn't have won those races that he was swimming in, and he wouldn't have been as sought after as he apparently was. Just saying. That's the least of the problems though, because yeah, there were a lot of problematic things in this damn book. I grabbed this arc because it was a sports romance that was swimming. And again, I used to be a swimmer, so I thought I'll try it out, see what it's like. It was ticking off every single dark romance plot point or trope that you can possibly think of. It had kidnapping. They happened to be step siblings at the end of it. There was a horrifying scene with her dad trying to kill her. The person that kidnapped her was working with her dad. I feel like that's a plot point from a movie based on a book that came out. It was a little bit problematic in the scope of the way it was writing the triggering scenes. Yeah, it had trigger warnings at the start, warning against a lot of them. Not all of them. That trigger warning list needed to be longer, and it's so misinformed in the BDSM, the Dom sub communities, that it's actually problematic for people reading it and taking it seriously and thinking that that's okay, because in fact a lot of that book was not okay. It wasn't like, oh, he's just been misrepresented as something else like 50 Shades of Grey. It was problematic to say the least. And like I said, ticking all the boxes that it needed to tick in order to be a dark romance book in this author's opinion, I realise. I feel like with more research at its core, this book would have been a lot better and not as problematic and bad. The story went from bully romance to insta-love so quickly I got whiplash. The found family sparks we were getting didn't connect properly, and the emotional depth overall was like a kiddie paddling pool. There was none. And to put the cherry on top, the ending wasn't even unique, because it's an ending straight from a series that got developed from a book onto an Amazon Prime series. I can't remember the name of it right now, but I'll put it on the screen if I think of it. This is essentially a book about abused people abusing people. And to romanticize that was bad, because to romanticize it in general is bad. To romanticize it when you haven't researched into it properly, in my opinion, was even worse. And it just wasn't a good book. So yes, 1 star for that book. But we move into the next book that I read in the month of June, which took up majority of the month, I will admit, which was Heat of the Everflame by Penn Cole. This is the 3rd book in a series, and I rated this one 4 stars. I believe that's on the higher end of all of my ratings thus far in this series, which I do also believe was the same as the first book. but in hindsight, I would rate the first book less than this. So basically, in this world, we have descended and we have humans, and the descended have powers from the gods because they were like procreated from the gods, and the humans obviously don't. And in this kingdom that we're in, like all the kingdoms have different rules with the mortals, but in the kingdom that we're in, they have the castle with the descended, and the humans live in their little village next to it. And yeah, they hate each other essentially. The humans have their little rebel group that they're trying to build, and the descended essentially just kill mortals when they want to. They don't, like, they sort of have happy fun times with the mortals, but if a half-breed is born, then the descended find out and they kill that person, that child, I should say, and quite possibly the parent of that child. So yeah, we're living in a world that's not the best place to be, but we're following DM, and her mother has gone missing, and she is trying to figure out what happened to her mother, but at the same time honestly just trying to survive. And she starts to find out that maybe her mother lied to her about some things, and she stops taking this medication that she's been taking for a while, and things start to develop from there after she joins the rebel group to help them out a little bit. That's all I can really say. It's hard for me to put into concise words what happened in that first book without spoiling a lot of the other books, because I'm 3 books in at this point. But the third book was a bit of an emotional roller coaster. I was pissed off at people. I was angry at people. I was upset with people. I was sad for people, about other people. I was happy for them. So much of an emotional roller coaster. There were times that there's a big chunk in the middle of this book where I felt like, I don't know what it was trying to say about our main character, but it made her look really, really selfish and really self-centered. And I just didn't appreciate that bit, but I like how it ended. This is one of those books for me that is very predictable. I have predicted everything that has happened thus far. I think one thing happened at the end of this book that I didn't expect happening, but of course this author is going to end the book like that because that's just who she is. But yeah, it's interesting. Every time you finish a book in this series, you want the next book straight away, and I'm so glad that the last book in this series now has a date on when it's coming out, and it is at the end of this year. I believe September, October, around then. I'm really excited for that because that'll be the last book in this series. We'll get all the answers we need, hopefully. So yes, Heat of the Elder Flame, that got 4 stars from me. Still a really good book and really enjoyable, but oh my god, was that a large book, and it took me so long to read it. But I got through it, and so I could move on to Lock Every Door by Riley Sager, which was the next book that I ended up reading. This is my first Riley Sager. I've wanted to read his books for a while. I rated this one 3.5 stars. Basically, we're following this woman, Jules, who is down on her luck, out of money, doesn't really have a stable living situation. She's just gotten out of a relationship where her partner cheated on her, and she's found this job listing for an apartment sitter. And she essentially will get paid a lot of money to apartment sit this empty apartment for 3 months, and this is going to get her back on her feet. When she gets there though, one of the other apartment sitters that she makes friends with ends up going missing, and she ends up trying to figure out what the hell happens to this person, what's happening in this apartment building in general, and just trying to survive, honestly. I really enjoyed this book a lot more than I thought I would. I'm not usually someone that can't predict a mystery thriller. And yeah, you can sort of predict the ending of this one at the start a little bit, but it gaslights you into thinking something else. And you go, oh, it's more sinister than we thought. But no, really, it's just a bunch of disgusting people doing disgusting things. And, you know, I liked that for some reason. And I really do want to continue in reading his books, because this was one of his first books. Was this the second book he wrote or the third book? Something like that. I really want to read his books in the future, but that one was a good start, I feel. I did want to start with Final Girls, but I think Lock Every Door was a good beginning for me. And because I had that from my book exchange, I didn't have to pay for that book either. So that was pretty good as well. I did really enjoy it though. So that was book number 3 for the month. The next book I read was Out of the Woods by Hannah Bonham Young, which I rated 4 stars. Now, this previously was a 5-star author for me, and this rating isn't against her writing at all in the slightest. It's more the subject matter, because we're following 2 people who have been married for, I think, 13 years, 12, 13 years. They've been together a lot longer though. They're like high school sweethearts. They've been married for so long. She's gone through a lot of trauma and grief in her life, and she's now gotten to a point, like over a decade later, where she's questioning everything, and her self-esteem has gone down the drain because she doesn't feel like she's accomplished enough in her life. And she sort of puts a lot of blame on her marriage and being married so young and relying on her partner so much. And so they end up going on this week-long camp, couples camp, if you will, to work on their communication and their marriage and to talk about where they're at. That's basically the whole premise of the book. I did really enjoy the writing. I was a little bit annoyed at our main character at first. I didn't like her until I realized that she was just me. And I was only annoyed because I was being called out so heavily. So the main character reminded me of me. The main male love interest reminded me of my partner, but in a more nerdy way. And I just really enjoy her writing so much. The way that she incorporates humor into her writing is so good. And it combines humor with grief, with pain, with suffering. And then you get this humor and this wholesome relationships and wholesome friend groups and wholesome like found families. And it's just so good. I do really want to read her next duology, which is literally called Next. This one's the Out duology because it was like Out on a Limb, Out of the Woods. Next of Kin, I believe, is in the other series. I really want to read those ones. I haven't heard good things about People Watching, but that's not on my list to read anyway. So I am hoping to get more books out of her that are like really, really good. And I'm excited to read more from her. But like, yeah, this, even though this was a 4-star, it was purely the storyline that I wasn't enjoying as much because we didn't get a beginning. We got a sort of beginning on their romance, but not a full one. But like the pain that was in this book was so like gut-wrenching. So I did really enjoy this book as well. The next book that I read was The Half King by Melissa Landers. I rated this 3 stars. I was umming and ahhing between a 2.5 and a 3. I listened to this in audiobook. This is basically a book where generations ago, the kingdom, like the noble families of the kingdom, started to raise up a rebellion against the goddess. And in turn, the goddess cursed their bloodlines. And they all have different curses, but the king's curse is that he, at sundown, turns to shadows and like disappears until the sun rises again. And he sort of turns up in the presence of people he loves, sort of thing. So like you can imagine what happens with the main character. Our main character is destined to become a seer, but she hasn't got the sight yet. And one of the other seers gets this vision of her basically breaking these curses and sends her to the castle for the new job opening. And the last seer that was in that job opening offed herself. And she's going into this knowing that she's meant to break the curses. So she's very hopeful for this, and she finds connections with the king and like the king's guard and like all these things. I was enjoying this at the start. As we got into the center of the book, it started to get tedious. Like, it's a young adult book, but it involves violence, gore, and spice. I don't think those 3 things at the level they are in this book should be in a young adult book. But the writing, the voice of the character was coming across as young adult. And to have the contradiction was a little bit much for me. I don't feel like we needed the spice at all. I feel like it was very insta-love and unnecessary. There's not many things that I can say about this book because, like, in my opinion, it wasn't a book that I was enjoying after a while, but it's a 3-star because the building blocks were there. The building blocks were perfectly there. I just felt like it needed more depth, it needed more detail, it needed more everything. I wanted more depth into the curses. I wanted more depth into the characters, everything like that. The last book I read was Dark Mode by Ashley Callaghan Blunt. I was reading this over the 2-month period, but I finished it last. This is following someone who in the past, because of technology, has been stalked and everything pretty aggressively by this guy. And because of that, she stays off the internet, she stays off technology. She doesn't own a smartphone, she doesn't have social media. And at the start of this book, she comes across a dead body, and the dead body looks exactly like her. And immediately she starts to get more paranoid. And as the murders keep happening and they're linking to the Black Dahlia killings, she is starting to get more paranoid and more wary and just scared and detached from people around her. This is one of those books that is almost too realistic. I rated it 3.5 stars. It's almost too realistic because it's based off real events that happened in Australia. As I didn't say before, this is set in Australia. I really enjoyed her downward spiral. I don't like that her friends started calling her essentially deranged. She didn't use that word, but essentially deranged really early on, to the point that I was like, do you not understand what she's going through? Of course she's not going to tell you everything about her past. It's like horrifying. But also the way this ended, I did not predict the person that was doing the killings. That is the last person that I would have thought would have been in on it. And not in my wildest dreams did I think that that was who was responsible. But the whirlwind that we go through in this book, it keeps you captured, it keeps you paying attention. The only reason it took me so long to finish this book is I was reading it in between every other book that I was reading, because it was my book club book for the month of May into June. But I didn't finish it before book club, I finished after book club, because again, I was prioritizing other books that I was reading. That was my feelings on all the books that I read these last 2 months. I did have a good reading month, like starting off with those 2 5 stars, really, really good. And it made me believe in my reading again, and I actually got back into the reading again, and I'm really hyped that I'm starting this month with 2 books already. So I'm having a great time, and I hope that your reading months went just as good as mine seemed to have. We're a bit up and down. There was a range of ratings in this video. So that is the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you come back and spend some time with me on my little corner of the internet. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your month, and I will see you then. Bye.